Colin had never felt air like this before, thick with smoke and heat, heavy with the scent of burning metal, and something sharp and bitter that made his throat ache. The ground under his boots was not solid stone, but a strange black surface cracked by blasts and scorched by fire. Each step echoed with a hollow sound, as if the land itself had been wounded. He kept his eyes forward, yet every shadow seemed to move. Every shape seemed ready to strike. And in that haze of smoke and noise he saw the humans. They moved in lines that looked loose, yet were tight in purpose. Each soldier carried strange weapons that hummed with a quiet energy, their armor scarred from older battles, yet polished, as if they had prepared for something important. Voices rose around him. Short commands shouted through the roar of distant fire. Their words were clipped and urgent, the kind of words that carried weight without needing long explanations. And though he did not know every meaning, he understood the tone. Readiness and focus. Colin had been told humans were dangerous, not only for their weapons but for the way they thought. Yet he had also been told they were reckless, unpredictable, and he wondered which was true as he followed them across the broken field. The air trembled with each step. Somewhere in the distance, something heavy struck the ground again and again like the heartbeat of a monster. The sound crawled into his chest and settled there, slow and deep, making each breath harder than the last. A human soldier glanced back at him, eyes sharp under a helmet, and motioned for him to stay close. Colin obeyed without question, though he was here as an observer from his own people. This was not his battlefield, not his war, yet the way the humans moved made him feel that if he fell behind, he would be swallowed by whatever hunted them. Ahead, the ground dipped into a shallow valley, where smoke curled and twisted. The air there was darker, heavier, and the smell was stronger, a metallic taste on the tongue. The first thing he noticed was that the humans did not slow as they reached the ridge. They knelt in unison, rifles raised, eyes scanning every shadow. One of them lifted a small device to the sky. It blinked with red light and made a faint ticking sound. The soldier gave a short nod and whispered into a small mouthpiece on their collar. The words were too fast for Colin to follow, but whatever was said made the entire group tense. Weapons rising higher, bodies leaning forward like predators, about to strike. Then the sound came, low at first, a rumble that rolled through the valley and up into the hills. It was not the roar of a machine, nor the cry of any living thing Colin knew. It was deeper, colder, a sound that seemed to press on his bones. He felt it more than he heard it, like a wave of invisible weight pushing against his chest. The humans froze for a moment, listening, and their silence made Colin's heart pound harder. One soldier muttered something under their breath, and another replied, with a single quiet word, a word that made the first soldier nod and check their weapon again. Colin wanted to ask what it was, but before he could speak, one of the humans beside him leaned closer and whispered without looking at him, "You will see." And there was no fear in their voice, only certainty, as if they had met this thing before, as if they knew what would happen next. The idea made his skin prickle, for his own people would never stand so still in the presence of such a sound. They would run, regroup, plan, anything but wait like prey, daring the predator to strike. The air grew colder, though the fires in the distance burned bright. Ash drifted down like black snow, settling on the humans' armor. Their faces were unreadable, yet their hands never left their weapons. Colin noticed how they spread out without losing sight of each other, how they moved as one body with many eyes, scanning every angle. It was not wild chaos, but controlled motion, a kind of order he had never seen in his own military. And though they said nothing to him, he felt the pull of their rhythm, his own steps beginning to match theirs without thought. Somewhere beyond the valley a shape moved, too far to see clearly through the haze, but its size was clear. It was huge, towering above the broken ridges, its movements slow yet heavy, each step shaking the ground. A pulse of light flashed deep within the smoke, as if something inside it was alive and burning. The humans adjusted their aim, shifting positions in near silence. Colin realized they were not just waiting. They were setting a trap. The thought made him uneasy, for if the trap failed, there would be nowhere to run. The sound came again, louder now, a howl mixed with a growl, layered with something that felt wrong to hear. as if the sound itself wanted to dig into his mind and tear away his thoughts. Colin's breath quickened. He tightened his grip on the small sidearm, given to him, though he doubted it would matter. The humans, however, did not flinch, their eyes locked forward, the barrels of their weapons steady. One soldier signaled with a quick hand motion, and the rest shifted a few paces, forming a shape Colin could not name, but felt was important. A shadow passed over them, blocking the dim light above. Colin's head snapped up, his stomach twisted. The thing above was not a ship, not a beast he knew. It was a shifting mass, a black cloud with edges that curled and stretched like smoke and water. Pieces of it seemed to fade in and out of sight. It moved without wings or limbs, yet with purpose. Colin's mind recoiled. It was like looking at something that did not belong in the world. Something the eye could see, but the brain could not understand. The humans tracked it with calm precision, their breathing steady, their hands firm. Colin realized then that the humans were not calm because they were fearless. They were calm because they had chosen to be here, chosen to face this thing, chosen to walk into a place where the air itself felt wrong. His own people would never choose such a path. Yet here he was in the middle of it, a stranger among warriors who treated the sight of death as part of the day, and he could not decide if that was courage or madness. But he knew it was something powerful. The rumble became a roar. The shadow thickened, and the humans began to move forward, each step measured, weapons ready. The sound of their boots striking the blackened ground in unison. Colin followed without thinking. The cold in the air deepened, his breath visible in thin white clouds, though moments ago the heat had been sweltering. Something in the sky seemed to pulse, and with each pulse the world around them seemed less solid, shapes blurring, shadows stretching, yet the humans pressed on as if the path ahead was clear. Colin felt the weight of the moment settle in his chest. The first clash had not yet begun, yet he could feel it pressing closer. The humans were leading him straight into the heart of something that should not exist. And though every part of him wanted to turn back, he could not, for there was something in the way they moved, in the way they stood together, that drew him forward. And he knew that whatever happened next would change everything he thought he knew about humans, about war, and about fear. Colin kept close to the humans as they moved down into the dark valley, each step echoing softly in the broken land, the smell of burning metal mixing with the bitter scent of scorched earth. The air felt heavy, as if the valley itself was holding its breath. Far above, the smoke drifted slowly like black rivers in the sky. The humans moved with purpose, every motion sharp yet quiet, their armor catching faint glints of light from the fires far behind, their faces hidden behind helmets that looked worn yet strong, weapons ready in their hands, as if they had been born holding them. He watched the way they checked their surroundings, eyes sweeping from shadow to shadow. One soldier knelt and pressed a hand to the ground, feeling the vibration of something approaching. Another glanced at a small screen on their wrist, a thin blue light scanning through the air before fading. They did not speak much. Only short words passed between them, words that carried no fear, only direction and focus. Colin felt like he had stepped into the heart of a single living creature with many bodies and many eyes, all moving with the same will. As they reached a ridge of shattered stone, the sound came again, that deep, unnatural rumble that crawled into the bones. The humans slowed and crouched, raising their rifles toward the far end of the valley. Colin followed their gaze, but saw only shifting smoke and a faint green glow far in the distance, a glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. He wanted to ask what it was, yet something in the way they watched made him stay silent. There was a quiet tension in the air, the kind that comes before something breaks. A sudden flash cut through the smoke, bright and sharp, and a moment later the ground shook as something massive struck the earth. Colin stumbled, but a human hand caught his arm and steadied him. The soldier did not even look at him. Their attention locked on the source of the blast. More flashes followed, streaks of red and white slicing the dark, each one followed by the thundering impact of weapons meeting targets unseen. The humans returned fire with precise bursts, the sound of their rifles cutting through the roar like sharp cracks of thunder, the air filled with the smell of hot metal and burning air. Colin stayed low behind a jagged rock, his small sidearm clutched tight, though he doubted it could harm whatever they faced. Peering over the stone, he saw movement within the glow, shapes sliding through the haze like liquid shadows. Too many to count, their forms twisting and bending in ways that made the eyes ache. They moved with strange speed, sometimes gliding low along the ground, sometimes rising into tall spirals of black mist that lashed toward the humans. Each time one came close, a human would fire, the bright red energy cutting the shadow apart. Yet moments later the darkness would pull itself together again. The humans did not panic. Even as the shadows grew closer and faster, they shifted positions in a pattern Colin could not fully follow, covering each other, moving forward one step at a time. Every soldier aware of where the other stood, their voices calm yet firm as they called out directions. One fell to a knee and fired upward. Another covered from the side. A third reloaded without looking away from the shifting mass ahead. It was a dance of survival, each movement feeding into the next. And Colin realized that if even one broke the rhythm, the entire unit would be swallowed by the dark. A blast of icy air swept through the valley as one of the shadows burst apart into smaller shapes that flew at them like shards of night. Colin ducked as a human pulled him down. The shards passed overhead with a sound like whispers, leaving a cold ache in his ears. He shivered though his armor was sealed tight. The human who pulled him down rose again without hesitation, firing into the mist and driving the smaller shapes back. Colin saw no anger in their movements, only determination, as if they had long accepted that this was their role, to stand between the darkness and whatever lay behind them. Through the smoke, Colin saw more shadows gathering, the green glow deepening, a hum rising in the air, low and constant. The humans adjusted their stance, each one locking into position. A voice spoke from their leader, calm and steady, giving short commands that made them shift again, forming a line that curved slightly forward, weapons aimed toward the thickest part of the shadow. Colin was pulled to the center of the formation where two soldiers stood guard over him, their eyes never leaving the front. He felt both protected and trapped, safe yet unable to run, even if he wished to. The first wave struck like a living storm. The shadows surged forward in a wall of writhing shapes. The humans unleashed a storm of red fire, each shot tearing into the mass, the sound of the rifles merging into a steady rhythm. The shadows hit the line and seemed to break apart, only to reform moments later. The humans did not falter, stepping back in perfect sync when the enemy pushed too close, then surging forward when they saw an opening. Colin's heart pounded with the rhythm of their movement, his breath quick and shallow, yet he could not look away. A soldier to his left took a hit from one of the shadow strikes, the black tendrils wrapping around their arm and pulling hard. Colin saw the armor start to crack under the pressure. Before he could think, another human leapt forward, slamming into the shadow with a burst of red energy from their weapon. Cutting the tendrils free, they dragged the wounded soldier back into the line without breaking formation. Colin could hardly believe the speed of it. No hesitation, no pause, just motion and purpose, and he felt the strange pull of their will, as if standing with them made him part of it too. The hum in the air grew louder, the green glow expanding until it lit the valley like sickly daylight. In its light, Colin saw the source of the shadow for the first time, a towering figure deep within the mist, its body made of twisting strands of black, its core pulsing with that green light, each pulse sending waves of darkness rolling forward. The humans adjusted their aim as one, focusing their fire on the core. Yet each shot seemed to weaken only a small part of it. The figure kept advancing, slow but unstoppable, the ground shaking with every step. Colin felt the cold inside him deepen as the figure came closer, its presence heavy, pressing on his thoughts. He realized with horror that it was not only attacking their bodies, but reaching into their minds, trying to twist their will. He looked at the humans and saw no sign of it taking hold. Their faces steady, their movements unbroken. It was as if they had built walls in their minds long ago, walls the shadow could not breach. And he wondered how they had done it, how they could face such a presence without breaking. The fighting did not stop, but Colin began to see a pattern. The humans were pushing the shadow into a narrow pass between two ridges. Controlling its movement with steady bursts of fire and careful steps, they were guiding it into a place where it could not spread wide, where its mass would be forced into a smaller shape. He realized this was their trap, and though it seemed impossible to trap something made of mist and darkness, the humans acted as if they had already won each step. Deliberate, each shot aimed to push the enemy where they wanted it to go. When the figure reached the mouth of the pass, the humans moved faster, closing in from both sides, their fire cutting through the mist, forcing it to retreat further into the narrow space. The green glow flared brighter, as if the figure understood the danger. It lashed out with tendrils that swept across the line, striking two humans hard. Yet the others did not slow, pulling the injured back even as they advanced, their formation tightening, their fire becoming a constant wall of red light. The roar of the shadow rising into a sound that shook the air. Colin stood in the center of it all, his heart racing, his mind struggling to keep up with the chaos. Yet a strange thought took hold. The humans were not winning because they were stronger, they were winning because they moved as one, because no single soldier fought alone, because every loss was met with another standing in their place. And he realized that in such a formation fear had no room to grow. For the moment one faltered, another carried their weight, and in this way they stood, against something that should have crushed them. The roar faded into a deep growl, the green glow dimming as the shadow's movement slowed. The humans pressed forward, step by step, their weapons tearing through what remained of its form, and Colin knew that this battle was not yet over. But he also knew something else. The way humans fought was unlike anything he had ever seen, and in that valley of smoke and darkness he began to understand why so many feared them. For it was not just their weapons that made them dangerous, it was the unbroken line they formed together, a line that even the night itself could not cross. The valley grew quieter for a moment, as if the world itself was listening. The air hung heavy with smoke and cold. The green glow from the shadow's core faded to a softer pulse like the breathing of some giant creature. Colin could feel the rhythm of it in his chest, a slow and steady beat that was both alive and wrong. The humans stood in their formation, weapons steady, eyes locked on the shifting darkness ahead. They did not move unless their leader gave the sign, their discipline holding them in place, even as the enemy seemed to watch them from within a mist. Then the glow flared again, brighter than before, and the shadow began to move in a way Colin had not yet seen. It rose higher, its form stretching upward until it towered above the ridges, the strands of black twisting around each other like the muscles of some monstrous beast. At its peak it bent forward, and from within the center a shape began to form, a shape that made Colin's breath catch in his throat, for it was almost like a face. Yet no face he had ever known. The eyes were pits of shifting green light, the mouth a jagged rift that opened and closed as if tasting the air. The sound that came from it was not a roar this time. It was something far worse, a low hum mixed with a chorus of whispers that seemed to speak directly into his mind. The words were not in any language he knew, yet their meaning was clear. They spoke of hunger, of endless cold, of a silence that would stretch across the stars once everything was consumed. Colin staggered back, clutching his helmet as if it could block the sound. But the humans did not falter, their weapons lifted higher, their stances firm, their leader giving a single sharp hand signal that made them spread just slightly to form a wider arc. From the edges of the mist, more shapes began to emerge, smaller than the main figure, yet still larger than any human, their bodies shifting between solid and smoke, their limbs ending in blades of shadow that cut the air as they moved. They spread out as if to surround the humans, moving with unnatural speed. Colin felt his pulse quicken as he realized they were outnumbered. Yet the humans did not step back. Instead, they adjusted their aim, their voices sharp and quick as they called out targets to each other, every word a thread that kept the formation together. The first of the smaller shadows lunged, a blur of black that crossed the ground in an instant, but a human rifle spoke before it could land. A burst of red light tearing through its chest, the shape exploded into a cloud of mist that was quickly burned away by more shots. Two more rushed from the side, but were met with the same precise fire. Every movement of the humans calculated, every shot placed with purpose. Colin could see how they read the battlefield, as if it were a living map, each soldier knowing where to be and when to fire without hesitation. Still, the main figure did not attack. It simply watched, its pit eyes burning, its whispers growing louder. Colin realized it was testing them, sending its lesser forms to probe for weakness. But the humans gave it nothing, their lines holding firm, their fire constant, each fallen shadow only adding to the thick haze that swirled between them and the monster. Then the ground beneath them began to tremble. Not from steps this time, but from something deeper, a vibration that rose from the earth itself, cracks opening in the blackened soil, faint green light spilling from below, as if the planet's core had been poisoned by the thing above. The humans shifted their weight, bracing, their leader giving a signal to tighten formation. Colin was pulled closer into the center, his protector's armor cold to the touch despite the heat of battle. Then with a sudden surge, the main shadow moved, not forward but upward, pulling itself higher into the air until its body seemed to dissolve into the clouds above. For a moment, Colin thought it had retreated. But then a column of green light fell from the sky like a spear, slamming into the earth just ahead of the human line. The blast threw debris into the air, the shockwave rattling his bones, and in that instant the lesser shadows surged forward all at once. The humans met them with a wall of fire, their rifles blazing in perfect unison, the red light cutting through the green haze. Colin felt the heat from the weapons, even from where he stood, the smell of scorched air thick and choking. He could see the determination in their movements, not frantic, but measured, each step taken to gain ground, each burst of fire timed to drive the shadows into crossfire. And yet for every one that fell, another rose from the mist, the pressure mounting as the line held. Through the chaos, Colin's eyes were drawn again to the towering shape above, its body now a swirling vortex of black and green, the whispers pounding in his skull like drums. He could feel it reaching into him, pulling at his thoughts, trying to plant something cold and sharp in his mind. But then one of the humans shouted near his ear, the sound breaking the grip for a moment. He looked at them and saw their eyes through the visor, fierce and unyielding, and he realized they too could feel the pull, yet they fought it with nothing but willpower, holding their focus like a shield. The humans began to push forward, step by step, forcing the smaller shadows back, their fire cutting paths through the haze, the green light from below growing dimmer with each push. Colin saw how they used the terrain, how they drove the enemy toward ridges and walls where they could not spread wide, how they kept their injured moving and firing, even if only with one arm. He had never seen such refusal to break, such unity in the face of something so alien and wrong, and it filled him with a strange mix of awe and dread. Then the main shadow struck, its body plunging down like a falling storm, the ground shattering under the impact, the wave of force knocking several humans off their feet. Colin was thrown back into a rock, his vision blurring, his ears ringing. He struggled to stand as the shadow's form began to shift, the strands of black twisting tighter until it became a massive figure with limbs and claws, its green core blazing bright enough to blind. The whispers now a scream that tore at the air. The humans regrouped instantly, forming a half circle around it, their weapons aimed for the core. The battle became close and violent, the shadow's claws sweeping across the line, sparks flying as they struck armor, humans rolling aside and firing upward into its chest, each hit sending a ripple through its form. Yet it did not slow. It strikes faster now, its movements more desperate. Colin could feel its frustration, the way it poured more power into each attack, and he realized it feared them, fear that their line would not break, that they would not run, even when faced with a thing born from the deepest dark. One soldier was caught by a claw, lifted into the air, but another charged forward, firing point-blank into the limb until it released them. The rescued soldier landing hard but rising again without pause, their rifle spitting fire into the green core. The teamwork was seamless, instinctive, the kind of connection forged only in countless battles. and Colin saw now why the Shadow's lesser forms had failed. For they fought as individuals while the humans fought as one mind in many bodies. As the core began to flicker, the Shadow's form wavered. Parts of it dissolving in a mist, the humans pressed harder, their leader's voice cutting through the chaos with short, sharp orders, their formation tightening again for the final push, every rifle blazing, every step forward shaking the enemy's hold on the ground. The green light dimmed further, the whispers faltered, and Colin knew they were breaking it. Not just with weapons, but with will, with a refusal to yield. The towering figure let out one last roar that rolled through the valley like thunder, its body unraveling into streams of black that fled into the cracks below. The green light fading until only darkness remained, the humans stood in silence for a moment, their weapons still raised, scanning the haze for any sign of return. Only when their leader lowered their rifle did the others follow, their breathing heavy but steady, their eyes already searching the field for wounded and lost. Colin stood among them, his heart still pounding, his mind struggling to hold the images he had just seen. He knew this was only one battle in a much larger war, but he also knew something else. The enemy they had faced was not just a creature. It was a force, a hunger that would not stop, and yet the humans had stood against it without breaking, without running, their unity the only thing that kept the darkness from swallowing them all. And he could not decide if that truth was comforting or terrifying. The valley was quiet now, yet the quiet was not peace. It was the pause between storms. The air was still heavy with the smell of burning metal and scorched earth. The green glow was gone, yet the darkness seemed to linger in the cracks of a land, as if waiting for its moment to return. Colin stood with the humans, their armor blackened and scarred, their faces hidden, but their posture unbroken, weapons still in hand, eyes scanning every shadow as if they expected the enemy to rise again at any moment. One soldier moved past him, checking the ridge above their steps, firm and sure despite the uneven ground. Another knelt beside a fallen comrade, speaking softly into their calm, while their hands worked quickly to patch the armor. Colin could hear the steady tone in their voice, no panic, no hesitation. Even as the wounded soldier groaned in pain, it was as if they had learned long ago that fear wasted time, and time was something they could never spare. The leader walked through the line, speaking to each soldier in turn, short words, crisp and quiet. Each one met with a nod or a brief reply. Colin could not hear all the words, but he could feel the effect. The soldiers seemed to straighten their backs, their movements growing sharper, as if the leader's presence carried weight beyond rank. When the leader reached him, they only looked at him for a moment before saying, "Stay close and be ready." The simplicity of it struck him. No long explanation, no reassurance, just an order meant to be followed without question. Colin watched as the humans regrouped, their formation adjusting to face the far end of the valley. Though the enemy was gone for now, he realized they were already preparing for the next strike. They did not treat victory as an end, only as a step. The wounded were moved to the center, given support by others who could still fight. Every pair of hands was working, no one stood idle, and Colin felt the strange pull again, the sense that if he stayed near them, he would be carried forward with their will, whether he wanted it or not. A faint vibration passed through the ground, and the humans froze for half a breath, their eyes turning toward the source before their leader gave a sharp gesture. The formation shifted like flowing water. Rifles lifted. The sound was distant, yet growing stronger, like heavy steps far below the surface. Colin felt his chest tighten. He thought the enemy had fled, yet here it was again, or perhaps it had never truly left. The humans did not curse or shout. They simply moved faster, checking weapons, sealing armor plates, readying themselves for whatever was coming. One soldier offered Colin a heavier rifle without a word. He hesitated, knowing he was no soldier, but the soldier pressed it into his hands and turned away to take their position. The weight of it was solid and cold, a reminder that here there was no place for bystanders. He stepped into the center again, the humans forming a living shield around him, their boots sinking slightly into the blackened soil as the vibration grew into a steady rhythm. From the far ridge, a shape emerged different from the one before. It was smaller, yet its movement was faster, more aggressive. Its body was wrapped in the same twisting strands of black, but the green light inside it burned hotter, pulsing in quick bursts. The humans adjusted their aim. At once Colin could feel their focus like heat in the air. No one fired, yet they were waiting for the signal. The leader's hand rose and held still, then dropped, and the valley lit with a storm of red fire. The creature leapt with impossible speed, crossing the ground in long bounds, its limbs striking the earth with such force that shards of stone flew into the air. It dodged and twisted the red beams, carving away pieces of its shadow form, but never slowing. Colin's heart pounded as it closed the distance, yet the humans did not break formation. Even as it crashed into the front line, claws sweeping wide, they moved together, one stepping back as another stepped forward, their weapons never lowering, their aim shifting with each movement of the beast. The fight became a blur of motion and light, the humans flowing like one body, each soldier knowing without words when to fire, when to move, when to shield. Another. Colin saw one take a hit to the shoulder, the black tendrils wrapping tight. But before the shadow could crush them, another soldier slammed into its side, firing point blank until it released the wounded. Even then, the injured stayed in the fight, their rifle spitting red bursts as they fell back to the center for quick repairs. The creature roared a sound that felt like pressure in the skull. Colin winced, but the humans did not even flinch. Their leader called out a short word, and the formation shifted into a wedge, driving forward step by step, each blast of their rifles forcing the shadow back. It lashed out with strikes that tore through the ground, yet each time it met only armor and steel, no flesh exposed, no opening left unguarded. Colin realized they were not only fighting to kill it, they were fighting to deny it any chance to harm them. A sudden movement from the ridge drew Colin's eyes. Another shadow was coming, smaller but faster, moving low along the ground. It was trying to flank them, but before it could reach their side, two soldiers broke from the formation, moving with perfect timing to intercept their shots, cutting it down before it could strike. The moment it dissolved in a mist, they slipped back into place without the line ever breaking. It was like watching a machine of flesh and will, each part vital, each movement purposeful. The larger creature began to slow, its green core flickering. The humans pressed harder, their fire becoming a constant wall to try to leap over them, but they met it midair, a storm of red energy ripping through its chest, sending it crashing to the ground. The impact shook the valley, yet they did not let up. Even as it writhed, they moved closer, circling it, weapons aimed for the core, until the light inside dimmed to nothing and its body crumbled into dust. The leader gave no cheer, no sign of relief, only a short command that sent the soldiers spreading out to scan the valley for more threats. Colin stood in the center of it, all his hands trembling around the heavy rifle. The humans moved past him, calm and steady, some checking their armor, others reloading their weapons. They spoke little, and when they did, it was only to give direction or confirm status. There was no boasting, no talk of glory, only readiness for whatever came next. Colin realized then that this was their strength. It was not that they felt no fear. It was that they did not allow fear to decide their actions. They fought for each other more than for themselves, each soldier trusting that the one beside them would stand no matter the cost. It was a bond forged not in words, but in countless moments where survival depended on another's will to act. That bond was stronger than the claws of the shadow, stronger than the whispers of its hunger. As the humans regrouped, the vibration in the ground began again, faint at first, then growing faster this time. It came from multiple directions. The leader raised a hand, and the formation shifted into a circle, weapons facing outward. Colin was pulled closer to the center, the cold air pressing in, the smell of the enemy's presence returning. The soldiers checked their weapons one last time, the sound of rifles charging filling the air like a drumbeat. Colin could feel the tension building, not as fear, but as something sharper, a readiness to meet whatever would break from the dark. He understood now that for humans the battle was never truly over. They did not fight to win once and rest. They fought knowing the enemy would return, and they prepared for that without complaint. It was a way of life for them. And in that moment, Colin felt a truth take root inside him. If the enemy kept coming, the humans would keep standing, and that unyielding resolve was the very thing the darkness feared most. The circle of humans stood, ready, each rifle aimed into the dark shapes moving in the distance, barely seen, yet felt in the earth. And in the air, Colin stood among them, the cold rifle heavy in his hands. The air smelled of ash, and something sharper like metal burned too long. The ground under his boots trembled again, but this time the tremble did not fade. It grew and deepened until it felt like the whole valley was breathing and the breath was not human. From the far edges of the valley, the shadows began to rise more than before, each one a different size, some thin and tall, others crawling low and fast. The green glow inside them pulsed like sick hearts. The humans did not shift their weight. They did not flinch. They waited for the command from their leader, and when the hand dropped, the valley exploded with red light rifles firing in tight bursts, each shot finding its mark, yet the shadows did not fall as easily as before. Colin watched as one of the thin shadows bent its body in an unnatural curve, letting the red fire pass through air, then striking out with a clawed limb that tore into the ground. Near the front line, the humans moved to meet it. Without panic, two stepped forward, while the one in its path dropped low and rolled away. The sound of metal against stone filled the air as the claws scraped across the armor plates. More shadows closed in from the side, trying to find the gaps in the line. But the circle held soldiers, shifting with quick precision, weapons tracking every movement. The light from their rifles cut across the darkened lines and arcs, yet for each shadow that fell, another rose behind it, and the green light in the valley grew brighter, like the heartbeat of something massive waiting just beneath the surface. The air grew thick, hard to breathe, the smell of burning metal stronger. The humans began to step closer together, the line tightening. Colin saw their leader move around the circle, giving orders in short bursts, pointing to the ridges and the open ground, marking threats before they could strike. Every soldier who heard them reacted at once, without asking why. Colin realized the leader was not just commanding, they were keeping the rhythm of the fight steady, controlling the pace so fear could not take root. One shadow broke through, slipping between two soldiers and rushing toward the center where Colin stood. He raised the rifle, but his hands shook. The green light in its chest burned bright, and for a moment he could not move before it reached him. A soldier threw themselves into its path. The claws tore across their armor, but the soldier held on, firing again and again until the green light dimmed and the body dissolved into dust. They did not look at Colin. They simply pushed him back toward the center and returned to their place. The fight grew harder, the shadows attacking in waves from all sides, forcing the humans to turn again and again. The ground littered with black fragments that faded into the soil. The sound of rifles was constant, a wall of noise that left no space for thought. Colin began to lose track of how long they had been fighting. The sky above was a haze of smoke, and the only light came from the rifles and the burning green cores of the enemy. A sudden rumble shook the ground harder than before, and from the far ridge, something massive began to rise. At first, Colin thought it was part of the rock, but then it moved with a slow, terrible weight, its body wrapped in black strands thicker than any before. Its green light was not a pulse, but a steady blaze. It stepped down into the valley, and the shadows around it seemed to draw strength from its presence, moving faster, striking harder. The humans shifted formation again, two lines, now one behind the other, weapons ready for the charge. The massive shadow moved with crushing steps, each one sending tremors through the ground. The humans opened fire, but the red light seemed to burn away less of its armor. The leader called for heavier fire, and the front line switched weapons, releasing bursts that shook the air like thunder. The creature staggered, but did not fall. Its roar filled the valley, shaking the smoke above into drifting spirals. The smaller shadows used the chaos to push harder against the humans, forcing the second line to fire in all directions. Colin saw the leader glance back toward the center for a moment, their eyes passing over him, then moving on. He did not know if it was to check his safety or to judge if he could be useful, but the weight of that look made his chest tighten. He gripped the rifle harder, forcing his hands to steady. When a shadow rushed in from the side, he fired, hitting the green light, and watching the body fall into dust. The soldiers near him gave no sign they had noticed, but they did not push him away either. The giant shadow was now close enough that its claws scraped the earth in front of the humans, each swing sending dirt and rock flying. The humans ducked and shifted, firing at its joints, at the glowing core deep in its chest. The green light flared brighter, as if in anger, and one massive claw came down, striking the ground so hard it sent several soldiers stumbling. The smaller shadows surged forward to take advantage, but the humans met them with a wall of fire, holding the line even as the giant loomed over them. The leader called out something sharp, and two soldiers broke from the line, running toward the ridge, carrying weapons heavier than the rest. They dropped to one knee and began firing in the giant's core, the blasts punching through layers of black armor. With each strike, the creature roared again, swinging its claw toward them. But another group moved to intercept, drawing its attention back to the main line. The coordination was perfect, each move flowing into the next like parts of a single living plan. Colin felt the ground shake again, but this time it was not from the giant's shadow. It was from below the soil, a deep, slow beat, like the steps of something far larger than anything they had yet seen. The green light in the valley pulsed once, twice, then all the shadows froze for a breath before pulling back toward the ridges. The humans did not chase them. They stayed in formation, watching as the dark mass on the far side of the valley began to crack open. From the split in the earth, a light brighter than the others began to rise, not green, but a cold white that hurt the eyes. The ground trembled in rhythm with its glow, and the air grew colder. Colin felt the hairs on his arms rise. The humans began to shift positions, forming a wider circle, the leader moving through them faster, now speaking in a voice that carried even over the distant rumble. The soldiers tightened their grips, checked their weapons, and aimed toward the growing light. Colin could see something moving in the glow, a shape too large to understand, its edges shifting like mist, but its presence pressing down on them like weight in the air. The humans did not step back. They planted their feet, the cold wind from the light whipping their cloaks. In armor, they were silent. Now, no commands, no words, only the sound of weapons charging and the steady beat of the earth beneath them. The light grew until it filled the sky, and the shape within began to push through the crack in the valley floor. Colin could not see its full form, only the impression of something with too many limbs, each moving with slow precision. The humans raised their rifles in unison, and for the first time Colin felt that even they were unsure what they faced, yet they did not move from their ground. They stood ready. The cold, white light rose higher until the whole valley glowed like ice, and the shadows on the ridges seemed smaller under its brightness. Colin felt the chill biting through his armor, the air so thin now it scraped his throat, each breath a shallow gasp. He gripped his rifle tighter, but the weight in his arms felt heavier, as if the light itself was pressing against his muscles. The humans around him stood still, their faces hard, their weapons steady and pointed at the shifting shape inside the crack in the earth. The ground split wider, a sound like stones screaming as massive slabs tore apart. The crack was now a canyon, and from it the white glow poured out in waves. The figure inside was clearer now, yet still wrong. Each movement flowed like liquid, but its limbs were too long, too thin, bending in ways no living thing should. Its skin was the same white as the light, with faint lines pulsing across it like veins filled with frozen fire. The humans did not fire, yet they waited, as if they knew the first shot would decide everything. The leader stepped forward, raising one arm, and the entire circle adjusted positions without a word. Rifles and heavy weapons aimed at the same spot in the creature's shifting chest. Colin realized they were not just soldiers, they were a single will moving through many bodies. The leader's voice cut through the cold air, and though Colin could not understand every word, he understood the tone. It was the voice of someone ready to stand until there was nothing left. The thing inside the light tilted its head, or what passed for a head. Its face was a smooth, pale surface with no eyes, no mouth. Yet somehow Colin felt it looking at him, not just at him, but through him. The weight of its gaze was not fear. It was something deeper. It was the feeling of being known completely, and it made his bones ache. His mind screamed to run, yet his feet would not move. The leader gave the order, and the valley exploded with fire. The rifles poured red light into the chest of the thing, heavy weapons thundering with force that cracked the air. The creature did not flinch. It simply stepped forward, its limbs stretching across the canyon floor, each step silent, yet shaking the ground. The blast from the weapons burned holes in its body, but the holes closed again, as if time itself was bending to heal it. A sudden burst of white light flashed from its chest, blinding Colin and the nearest soldiers. The cold grew sharper, biting at the skin through the armor. Several soldiers stumbled, as if their strength had been drained, yet they stayed in formation. The leader shouted new orders, pointing toward the ridges. A group of soldiers broke away, sprinting through the cold light toward a higher position, their boots crunching on frozen earth, weapons slung across their backs as they moved with purpose. The creature reached the edge of the canyon, and unfolded two new limbs from its back, each tipped with a shape like a blade, but made of the same glowing white as its body. The limbs moved with terrible speed, slashing at the ground and sending waves of frozen air across the valley. The humans braced behind their shields as the frost spread over the soil. The sound of ice cracking under pressure filled the air. Colin saw one soldier caught in the frost, their legs frozen to the ground. They raised their rifle and kept firing until a blade limb swept past and sent them flying into the smoke. The humans closed the gap in the line without breaking their focus, but Colin felt the hole that soldier left like a gap in a wall during a storm. The group on the ridge set up something large and black with a long barrel that shimmered with heat despite the cold. They aimed it at the creature's chest. The leader called out, and the rest of the soldiers shifted fire to draw the creature's attention away. The barrel on the ridge glowed brighter, and then with a sound like a breaking world, it fired a beam so intense the air rippled around it. The beam struck the creature in the chest, and for the first time it staggered. The white light in its body, flaring as cracks spread through its skin. The humans did not cheer. They pressed harder, rifles firing in rhythm, heavy weapons slamming into the cracks, widening them. The creature swung its blade limbs in fury, tearing at the ground, sending shards of frozen stone flying. Colin dropped to his knees as one shard cut across his armor, the force nearly knocking him down. But he stayed low and fired into the cracks. The creature roared without a mouth, the sound vibrating inside his skull. The cracks spread faster, now the white light inside the creature flickering as if something within was breaking apart. The leader shouted again, and the soldiers moved in tighter, their fire focused on a single point in the chest. The beam from the ridge fired again, punching deep into the wound, and the creature bent forward, its limbs thrashing, but its steps growing slower. The frost on the ground began to melt, steam rising into the cold air. Then the creature froze completely, the white light inside it pulsing slow and weak. The leader raised their hand for a final strike, and every weapon in the valley unleashed at once. The sound was beyond thunder. It was the sound of an ending. The cracks in the creature's body split wide, and the light burst free, shooting into the sky. Like a spear of ice, the limbs of the creature fell apart into dust, the body collapsing into the canyon, leaving only the cold glow, fading into nothing. For a moment, there was only silence, the humans still in formation, weapons aimed at the canyon, the leader watching. Without moving, Colin felt his breath return, but it carried no relief, because in the silence, he could hear something new, a deep rumble far beneath them, not like the movement of the creature they had killed, but something far larger, something older. The ground shook harder than before, small stones rolling across the valley floor. The leader turned their heads slowly toward the sound as if they had been expecting it all along. From the far horizon, a second light began to rise, not white, not green, but a color Colin had no name for. It shimmered and shifted as if the air itself was being torn apart. The humans began to move again, this time forming two separate lines, one facing the canyon, one facing the rising light. Colin realized this was not the end, this was the warning. The leader gave a short signal, and the soldiers on the ridge packed their weapon with swift precision, carrying it down as fast as they had gone up. The two lines tightened, every soldier ready for what was coming. The air around a strange light began to hum low and steady, the hum growing louder until it filled the chest like a second heartbeat. Colin stared at it, unable to look away. It was not just light, it was the shape of something breaking through reality itself. The leader looked at Colin, then at the light, and for the first time since he had met them, there was something in their eyes that was not iron or fire. It was weight, a silent truth, and Colin knew, without words, that whatever was coming next would make the thing in the canyon seem small. The strange light on the horizon grew larger until it filled the edge of the sky, its shape twisting as if space itself was bending around it. The hum in the air deepened and carried a weight that pressed against every bone. Colin felt his knees weaken, but he stayed standing, because the humans were still standing, their rifles ready, their eyes locked on the horizon. The leader moved to the front of the line, their shadow stretching long on the frost-covered ground. The soldiers on the ridge had returned, carrying the heavy weapon and setting it down in the exact center of the formation, its barrel aimed at the light. The air changed, it became thick, as if the world was now underwater. Breathing was hard, movement was harder. The light split in two halves, and between them a darkness formed deeper than any shadow Colin had ever seen. It was not the absence of light. It was the absence of everything, a hole in the world itself. The edges of the darkness rippled, and from it a sound came, not a voice, not a roar, but something like 1,000 whispers speaking at once. None of the words made sense, but the feeling they carried made Colin's skin crawl. It was not anger or hate, it was hunger. From the darkness, a shape began to emerge. It was bigger than the creature from the canyon, bigger than any ship Colin had seen. Its body was made of the same nothingness as the hole it came from, but its outline shimmered with that strange color that hurt the eyes to look at. It had many limbs, each ending in long hooks that dripped with black mist. Its head was like a spear pointed forward, yet split down the middle to reveal rows of teeth made of that same strange color. It moved slowly, but every step seemed to bring it closer, faster than it should. The leader raised one hand, and the humans began to move in a pattern Colin had not seen before. The formation split into 4 groups, each one moving to a different side of the valley. The heavy weapon was rotated slightly, so it could fire at an angle. The leader stayed near at hands on a small device covered in switches and dials, their face still calm, yet their eyes sharper than steel. Colin felt his chest tighten, not from fear alone, but from the growing certainty that this was the thing they had been waiting for all along. The whispers grew louder, pressing into Colin's mind, filling it with pictures of worlds burning, of skies turning black, of stars shattering into dust. He shook his head, but the images stayed. The humans around him did not flinch. They had heard this before, they had faced it before. The leader shouted something short, and the heavy weapon roared, its beam shooting toward the creature. The beam struck one of its limbs, tearing it apart. But the pieces did not fall. They turned into black mist and were pulled back into the darkness behind it. The creature lunged forward faster than its size should allow, one hooked limb slashing down at the nearest group of soldiers. They scattered just in time, the hook cutting a trench into the frozen earth. The ground shook so hard that Colin almost fell, but he pushed himself back up and kept firing into the creature's body, each shot vanishing into the blackness without leaving a mark. The leader adjusted the heavy weapon and fired again, this time aiming at the split in its head. The beam hit, and the teeth inside flared with that strange color. The creature reeled back, a sound like the tearing of metal filling the valley. Colin thought they had heard it, but then the darkness behind the creature widened, and more limbs began to reach through, some long and thin, others thick and heavy. The humans tightened their formation again, switching targets with quick precision. The leader gave new orders, and 2 groups ran toward the ridge, dragging packs behind them. They set up smaller weapons that began to fire glowing nets of energy at the limbs, trying to slow them. The air filled with the smell of ozone, and the ground hissed where the nets touched it. One limb caught a soldier by the leg and pulled them toward the darkness. Colin saw them fire at the limb. Even as they were dragged, the nets from the ridge wrapped around the limb and tore it, and half the soldier dropped to the ground, rolling free. But their armor smoked from the touch of the black mist. Colin rushed forward to help pull them back into the line. The soldier gave a short nod and went right back to firing without a word. The creature pushed forward again, its head lowering as if to spear through the humans. The heavy weapon fired a 3rd time, and this shot burned straight through its head, the strange colors spilling out like liquid light. The creature stopped moving for a moment, and every soldier fired into the wound. The whispers turned into a low roar, shaking the air itself. But the creature did not fall. Instead, it began to pull itself back toward the darkness, as if retreating. Colin felt a brief flicker of relief, but it died when the darkness began to spread across the ground, not just at the horizon, but under their feet, cracks opening in the frost. As black mist rose from them, the leader shouted for everyone to fall back toward the ridge. The humans moved in perfect order, covering each other. As they retreated, the heavy weapon was dismantled and carried by 4 soldiers, moving as one. The ground behind them sank into the spreading darkness. They reached the ridge just as the entire valley floor collapsed into the black void, the strange light on the horizon fading into the distance. The darkness pulled back, but not all the way. It stayed at the far end of the valley like a wound in the world. The humans set up a new perimeter at the ridge, weapons ready, but the creature did not return. The whispers had stopped. The air was still. The frost on the ground began to thaw under a weak, pale sun. Colin stood there breathing hard, trying to understand what had happened. The leader walked to his side and spoke in a low voice, their words simple Yet heavy this was not the first time the darkness had come, and it would not be the last. The creature was only a scout. The true danger was what waited beyond the darkness, and it had been watching the entire time. Colin looked out over the wound in the world and felt the truth settle in his bones. The galaxy was not a place of stars and empty space. It was a place of predators, and the humans were the only ones who had chosen to stand and fight them. The leader turned and walked back to the soldiers, their steps steady, as if the battle had been nothing more than another day. Colin followed, but his mind was still on the wound in the valley. The whispers were gone, yet he could almost feel them waiting just beyond his hearing. He knew now why the humans fought with such unity, why they moved like one being. Because against the thing in the darkness, there could be no weakness, no doubt, no hesitation. They were the wall between the galaxy and the end. And Colin had chosen to stand with them. He did not know when the darkness would return, only that it would, and when it did, the humans would be ready, and so would he.